obviously they haven't been doing it. I didn't know that for this weekend. What do you charge? And so
Oh, there's Brian.
he went over and said, well, I'm going to charge a little bit more to do the first one. And then whatever, a little bit more for, and then less after that. Yep, okay. So I pull in from work today and he's over there. And he's clearly not. And he's with a push mower. So I went over and I said, how's it going, buddy? This is lighting up more than you can chew.
Yeah.
And I said, do you want me to? So I went and got my ride.
I saw you on the riding mower when I went home to grab food.
Yeah, I went over as fast as I could. You're going to have to still rig it up. I said, it's better than it was before.
We're just waiting on Brian to get logged in and we'll start momentarily.
Okay, we'll go ahead and start. Sorry, I had too many Zoom accounts. I logged in the wrong Zoom account. All right, so this 5 to 6 o'clock slot is just a workshop, which in RSU terms at least means a more informal meeting and often one where we try and get participation from people attending the meeting. So our goal is to discuss, goals for academic year 21-22. So this has become a pretty regular part of the board process where we do a intentional goal setting, and then we try and direct some of the board time and energy. Oftentimes that ends up meaning administrator and sometimes financial resources, but it's intended to be a setting of priorities towards those goals. The process is going to be, we'll have a background discussion during this workshop. We have a little more time during the meeting if we need it. And usually what we try and do is get the goal, a first draft of the goals put together. People can sit on it for 2 weeks and then we'll actually vote on the goals at the next meeting on June 22nd. So what I've asked board members to do, but I would love for anybody else who's here in the meeting who wants to participate to also do, is to do a SWOT analysis, SWOT. So identify, if each person could identify 1 or 2 strengths of the district, 1 or 2 weaknesses / growth areas for the district, 1 or 2 opportunities for the district, and 1 or 2 threat areas. I know this sounds a little militaristic, it comes out of business, but I think it's a useful exercise. And so we'll get those big picture, and then we'll see how that turns into goals. Just as a reminder also, we do have standing goals which appear on our agendas. So we have a district-wide set of student growth and achievement goals, meet students where they're at, move them forward, growth of the whole student, social, emotional, physical, creative, aesthetic, as well as intellectual, creating a growth mindset, lifelong learner, intellectual risk-taking, learning from mistakes, ongoing fundamental board responsibilities, which are fiscal responsibility, facilities, continue to hire excellent staff, building cross-stakeholder teamwork and collaboration, facilitating transparent district-wide curriculum processes, adopting and updating policies through a transparent consultative process. Those are on the floor if anybody wants to change them. We've had them for a few years. So I think our energies are going to be focused on the single year goals. Last year was basically COVID, construction, and continuing efforts on technology. So what I would like to do is to start the SWOT analysis. I'm going to, let's see if I need to be a co-host to share a screen. Okay. Oop, I don't want to present. I guess I want to edit, so we'll just leave it like this. So if we start with strengths of the district, anybody want to go first? You want to go first, Jake?
Yep, sorry, had to find the unmute button. So I had written down some strengths. I actually had 2, 4, 7, but I'll keep it to a couple. I thought one of the strengths from this past year was the flexibility and adaptability we showed this year around COVID. Specifically, when to bring students back, when not to bring students back, when to hold, when to go. I thought another strength of ours was budget management through 2021 and also the future budget going into 21-22. I thought the progress made with the construction project was a strength. And then the last strength I'll share is the 2 contracts that we negotiated as well.
Great. Mark, anything you want to add?
Sure. I've got 2 of mine are the same as 2 of Jake's. I thought tops on my list was the kind of adaptiveness we showed throughout the year, primarily with COVID, but not exclusively. And I think that's in many ways a long running strength of this district, at least under kind of current administration, is its adaptability. So I thought that was definitely the top one for me. I thought also kind of fiscal management was a strength that I had listed, which Jake also mentioned. And the other strength that I had written down is I think that we as a district have made real progress on the way in which we use data, and we're poised to make another big leap on that in the next few years, in my opinion. So those are the strengths that I had.
Okay, I guess I'll go next. So I'm going to go a little more fundamental. I think the people, we just have an amazing staff, faculty, students, parents. And the challenge has always been bringing those groups together and getting the maximum synergies. And so I really feel like I'm seeing an increasing degree of collaborative process, whether it's goal setting or working on things. So I really see, it's not perfect. Every organization has friction, but I see an increasing degree of people working with each other, sharing ideas across those stakeholder boundaries and listening across those stakeholder boundaries. So that's what I'll list as there's many, but that's what I'm going to list this year. Meredith, anything you want to add?
Well, I was going to let Patrick go, so I didn't.
Oh, sorry, Patrick. I'm just going around the room, but
No problem.
go ahead, Patrick.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to avoid any kind of overlap here. But, one thing that I haven't seen identified yet is I thought as a new board member and as a new parent in the district, I thought that the level of communication on a district-wide and on a school-wide level was very good. So when an issue affected either the whole district or
Yep, I think Patrick just froze. Give him a minute. All right, I guess we'll come back to Patrick. You want to add yours, Meredith?
Yeah, there's a lot of crossover, but I think what it's kind of suggested under people, but I would like to just say, I think innovation, that we have staff who have really been innovative this year. And I think, the response this year is really because there's a mindset of innovation with our staff and willingness to, try new things. And so I'd like to add that to the list. I think everything else that was on my mind was already listed.
Okay, looks like we're still waiting for Patrick, but administrators or audience members, Laura too, you're all welcome to jump in. Richard.
I agree with much of what's been said, especially the adaptability and flexibility to respond this year in particular, but not exclusive to this year also. I think we've shown that kind of that motivation to do that. And I think thoughtful and inclusive planning processes. I think right from the board, right down through, I'm not sure if that was up there yet, but thoughtful and inclusive planning processes. And then much of what I was thinking has already been said.
Okay, great.
Mhm.
Anybody else want to jump in?
I'll just chime in that I agree with Meredith around the innovation. This was all new to everybody, and we could have gone in any number of directions, in March of 2020. So there really was an attitude of innovation. I would also say resilience. People were really thrown, as we know, curveballs. We're all still standing, and this district is going to be stronger because of it. So that's a real strength, is just making it through this difficult shared experience is going to be a strength.
Kristen or Meredith D or anybody else? I can't see the whole list of people. So
I was definitely going to say resilience. I mean, it's amazing how the staff just adapted and changed and made the best of every single time that we had. So definitely resilience.
I would like to add robust community support, and the idea that really this whole community is behind. It feels like everything that we commit to as a district with fidelity. And I also wanted to add the alignment of our actions with our beliefs. I think that in some districts that there's a real tension there, and often, an ease of process leads to a disconnect between policy and action and belief. But here in our district, I think that there's an alignment between those two.
great. And I can't see with my screen sharing if Patrick's back in, but
I'm watching. He's not.
okay. Anybody else want to jump in? All right, that's quite a good list. We can go. It almost seems petty to talk about weaknesses in a year of such challenge and such success. I know probably I'm going to identify things that are much longer term and in fact, not even possible during COVID. But I do think it's healthy to talk about, especially as we're thinking about goals, to talk about this area too. And you can think of them as growth areas if you prefer instead of weaknesses. Jake, anything you want to put on?
Yeah, I kind of looked at weaknesses a little bit differently than you did. I kind of looked at it as, things that I wish would have went better throughout the course of this last year. And, what I'm about to say is it was inevitable anyways, but the emotional well-being of students and the educational losses due to COVID, obviously, we did the best with the hand we were dealt, and I think we did a great job. And I think we did a lot better than most other districts did. But there's probably still not denying that there is some, emotional well-being loss and educational loss as well, just due to the circumstances that we were dealt.
Okay. Mark?
I got two, and really one of them is only partial. So I guess I'll start with the partial one first. I think that communications have improved dramatically in most areas over the last year and even 2 years, and those people who've been watching this for a while know that that's been something we've really tried hard to do. That being said, I still think there's some pockets where communications have been a little bit lacking, or in some cases a little bit confusing, or in other cases maybe a little bit incomplete. So I wouldn't want to mark that off as a fait accompli just yet. And then the other weakness or growth area that I identified was, again, it's one that we've been working on for a while, but it's kind of cross-school collaboration and sense of community. I think, Brian mentioned, and correctly so in my opinion, that there's been a lot better kind of stakeholder interaction and engagement and cooperation across boundaries. And I think that's true, but I think in at least in some instances, it still seems that we've got three distinct entities that don't share a whole lot more than a geographical space. And I think that we've made some progress on that, but I think we've still got some room to grow on that as well. So those are my two growth areas.
Okay. The one I'm going to put in was probably literally impossible during COVID, but having moved from other districts and talking to other people who moved from other districts, I think we're not tapping parent resources inside the school during the school day. I think outside of the school day, outside of the school we are, but I think there's a lot of opportunities. A lot of parents would be happy to volunteer time. And so maybe I'll just put that as using more parent volunteer time. I think to many people who've been in other districts, and they can be big districts or little districts, big city, I don't think it's really tied to security. The doors can feel very tight compared to other districts, much more porous boundaries. I assume somebody will let me know when Patrick comes in. You anything you want to add, Meredith?
Yes. I would say, I don't know if this is a weakness or just a kind of general area of concern to monitor. So maybe it's under threat. I don't know where it's categorized best, but I would say leadership stability. You know, we've hired a principal every year I've been here. Last year, we also hired 2 other district administrators. One was due to an expansion, you know, so it's just an area of concern that I think that we should be transparent is an area of concern. It's challenging to have leadership turnover. So that was the biggest thing on my mind.
Okay.
But I think going back to, and I guess, can you clarify how weakness is different from threat? Like, how do those differentiate?
I guess I see a weakness as systemic, something that's been ongoing, and a threat is something that's on the horizon or near term. Yeah, there's certainly some overlap.
So, you know, I think the equity conversation is something we know that there are areas where we need to make change in curriculum and practice. And I mean, we just don't know yet what we don't know in some ways. But I think that's something that's on the horizon for us. So maybe it comes under threat. I kind of listed it in both places, but so that one. And then I'm not sure where the tech conversation goes, because it certainly feels like a systemic kind of conversation.
Yep. Anybody else want to go? Richard, I guess you were next last time around. Doesn't have to be that way this time.
Sure. I'm thinking about low achieving students in particular are an area of concern for me, and what we can do to improve outcomes for them. And I don't really have an answer, but I think we can do a better job in that regard. And I single out the low achieving subgroup more than, because I see that as more of a pressing need. I mean, I think we need to move all students ahead, certainly, but that low achieving group in particular, I spent a lot of time thinking about.
I mean, not to use this in a dismissive way, because I would like to see us be a leader in this, but that's really a core challenge for schools, I think, universally.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. Who else wants to go? Reg?
I'll go. It was really either emerged or revealed last summer when we were, planning a lot for reopening and lots of meetings with different groups. And there's still just this element of, I don't know, this element of mistrust between teachers and staff and administrators and the board. And it showed itself at a lot of these, public meetings when there was just resistance or questioning whether we were doing the right thing, or would we keep people safe in the schools, or would we, anyway, so I'll just say mistrust that I thought had kind of disappeared, but it revealed itself.
I guess high anxiety times can expose those kinds of things.
Yeah, and it might just be that.
Yeah. Kristen?
I don't have anything to add.
Okay. Meredith, Lisa?
I would say the integration of non-Orono students into Orono High School, and the pockets of inequity that emerge as a result of that, and feeling like that's an area that, if we could address it, would lead to significantly improved outcomes in other areas, one of which is low achievement, as Richard mentioned.
Okay. Oops, Patrick just stepped away. Lisa, go ahead.
Yeah, I absolutely love the cross-school collaboration, the sense of district identity. Love that. And I know this is something that was impacted by COVID, and I know it's also something that's being addressed with the building construction, but just the space to provide the services that we have for our students. And it seems like those services seem to be increasing, or maybe the need for them, and it's hard to keep up space-wise.
Okay. Sounds like you're mostly speaking about space quantity rather than quality.
Yes.
Okay. Patrick, are you ready to go, or you still getting set up?
I think I'm good. I'm on a different computer now. Where are we? Which of the SWOT?
So we
areas?
moved from strengths to weaknesses, but you didn't get to throw in
Okay.
strengths. So go ahead if you want.
Yeah, so for strengths, I really just want to make the point that the communication between really the administration and I felt the wider community was very good. I felt like when it came to large issues and large groups of people that needed to get information, the school district did a very good job. And then kind of dovetailing on that for weaknesses, I think that communication and resolving issues when it's a much smaller group is more of a challenge. So if something impacts maybe a small handful of students, understanding when it's appropriate to notify which small groups is maybe something we could work on.
Okay, that's an interesting distinction. Anybody else want to jump in? I wasn't sure, Laura, if I saw you unmuting your mic at one point, but you're welcome to jump in too. Okay, we'll go ahead to opportunities. Jake?
Yeah, so, I feel with everything that we have gone through with COVID, we kind of have an opportunity to reset to some degree the education that we offer and deliver, right? So, COVID hasn't been great, but, I'm sure there's things that we've learned from COVID and things that we can pull from COVID and continue them moving forward, even after COVID. So I thought, we have an opportunity to welcome in some of those things if it's appropriate. And then the other thing I thought we have a good opportunity for is, I think in general, the larger Bangor area community feels that we probably did better during this than most of these schools around us. And I think that could lead us to have more sending schools, more sending communities sending students here because of the way that we handle things and have handled things. So I kind of viewed those as two opportunities that we have moving forward.
Okay, Mark?
It's going to look like Jake and I got together and collaborated on this, but we didn't. I would agree. The first opportunity is COVID related, and I guess I see COVID opportunities on two fronts. One of them is the innovation, right? I mean, we had to make a lot of changes because of COVID. Some of them we never want to see again. Others of them were pretty helpful and pretty useful, and I think there's a challenge there, right? Figuring out which are the latter and which are the former, but I do think there's some good innovation that happened, and I think if we can keep those, that's great. The other COVID-related opportunity, and I think Jake touched on this as well, is there are a lot of things that had been done, not just in education, but in a lot of areas for a long time that all of a sudden couldn't be done during COVID. And we all know that inertia oftentimes makes change difficult, but we've just went through a 15-month plus period where some things that have been done forever weren't done. And maybe some of those things shouldn't have been being done forever. And if again, we have to figure out which ones those are. But I do think that as we start to come out of COVID and hopefully continue to make progress moving forward, we should devote a serious amount of energy to determining, okay, which innovations do we keep or do we want to keep? And then which things that we had to get rid of we may be better off without not going back to. So those are some opportunities. I also think, as Jake said, we've got a huge marketing opportunity here. I would agree. I've heard from a lot of people that wish that their kids had been in Orno in the last 15 months, and they ask what we've been doing, and I tell them, and they're stunned. It's not what their kids have been getting. So I do think we've got an opportunity there to continue to grow. We've already been growing at the high school. We've even been growing at the middle school in terms of sending community kids. ACE has been increasing by natural increase, but that's still good too. But I think we've got an opportunity there. And I think that opportunity is compounded by the fact that we're going to start to see the fruits of this facilities project, that we can show off as the new school year starts. So I think that's definitely an opportunity area for us. And then the last opportunity I had listed is it kind of goes in with the strengths, but I do think that we are really in a great position to kind of build on the start of data informed change, right? Like Brian and I and Jake have been at the data part of this for a long time. And when we first got on the board, there was very little use of data in any of the schools. And now we have the data, and people are starting to understand how to use it. And we've got administrators who are fully in support of that. And I'm not saying that data is the end all be all, but if you're going to make change and pursue a course of future direction, being informed by the data is much better than the opposite. So those are my opportunities.
Okay. Patrick, you want to go next?
Sure. So I'm still pulling up all my windows I had for the meeting before. I agree with a lot of what Mark said. The only thing I want, rather than kind of like duplicate everything, I just want to say I really agree with using what we've seen that worked as a way to find out what we really appreciated and maybe missed, and what we didn't do and didn't miss and maybe don't need to do. So thank you, Mark, for going into such detail with that. I had written down kind of along the communications front that I think that one opportunity that we have is maybe to, when people have a complaint or they feel like their needs haven't been addressed, to invite them to be part of the process of looking at how we do communication. And I thought that, over the past year, I've spoken to a lot of people who maybe felt like their needs weren't addressed or the communication wasn't as clear as they wanted it to be. And when someone expresses that, maybe invite them to be part of a process of saying, okay, how can we figure this out? What would have made this better for you? And so rather than kind of set up an oppositional relationship with some of the community members or parents, try to make them part of the process. I'll leave it at that for now. I'll kind of skip some of these other bullets I had.
Okay, I'll go next. I mean, it's kind of hard not to see COVID as probably the biggest opportunity, and the biggest threat is just the biggest irregularity most of us will see in our lifetimes, I hope. But so I agree with that. I'm going to say something that builds on the recruitment, and I will just freely confess that this is something I'm going through as a parent of a child in the schools right now. But I really think it turns into a recruitment opportunity, which is the match between the high school schedule and the university schedule. The maroon white day thing just kills us in terms of, I don't know that we, want to rejig the whole, we don't have to match up everything so we have the same bell schedule as the university. I'm not saying that, but the maroon white day just stomps any connection to the university. I think it stomps connections to the other schools, although the staff's done a good job about trying to fix that, but it just breaks a lot of connections. But I'm focused on the university, and the only other town I know, though it's a college town that has a university as close to the high school as we do here, is Storrs, Connecticut, UConn. And they have 80% of their kids in the high school taking a class at the college. So I know when I say taking classes at the college, it sounds like it's half a dozen kids, and it's maybe kids that are already, getting a lot of needs met. But I think that would be my goal. I'll just say that as the opportunity is to get 50% of our kids taking a class at the high school. I know we have UTC, but there's a lot of, and so it's not just, calculus 2 or something. It's the art classes, the film classes, the language classes, which expand into not just Spanish and French, but Latin and Russian and German. So, and I just think about that as a recruitment opportunity. We have a lot of academically focused parents in Glenburn and Vesey that are sending their kids to John Baptist right now, or sometimes Bangor. But I think if they knew they could come, and I don't know if you know, there's the SPIRES program. The state of Maine covers 12 credits a year for any kid who's in high school, as long as their guidance counselor says it's okay and they have a B minus. I think it's B minus average. So it's not a cost issue. It's really just a schedule issue. And I think the opportunity to get a huge number of our kids taking classes all over the spectrum and really extending our offerings at the university are a big opportunity. So I'm going to phrase it as, 50% goal of high school taking a college class, which in turn is a recruit. I think that's a huge recruitment opportunity. If a parent's sitting there and saying, wow, my kid could, 12 credits is 4 classes a year, my kid could get 8, even 12 college classes of credit. That's that turns into real economics for the parents as well as academics. So, and nobody else can match what we have, right? Even Old Town's much further away than we are. So it is literally a unique position in the state. So that's my opportunity. Meredith, what would you add?
I think the COVID innovation is a big part of what I think is a huge opportunity right now. I think that in terms of data, I had kind of a different thinking about that in terms of opportunity with NUIA now being in our schools K through 11. It really gives us an opportunity to have this, system of data for students all the way through that we've never really had in that way. So I see that as just a follow-on to Mark's comment. But, one of the things, and I probably should have mentioned this under strengths, but something this year that really allowed us to do, in my opinion, a lot of what we were able to accomplish with in-person learning is our small class size. And I just think that priority that we place on having small classes really paid off this year. And I think it just gives our instructors opportunities for innovation in different ways. So I think that's something that's really important to preserve, to be able to continue innovation and to be able to give us opportunities to personalize learning. And so I think that's a real strength and opportunity into the future.
Okay, anybody else? Richard?
What I had was kind of similar to much of what's been said. I think we have a review of an opportunity to formally review technology assets and integration opportunities, like with now that we're able to hopefully put COVID in the rearview mirror and take advantage of what was learned this year to apply moving forward. But I think that's pretty much been said already.
Okay, it is the big one on the table.
Yeah.
Yep. Reg?
Yeah, it's already been said too, but I would sum it up as just momentum going into next year, momentum that can translate into recruiting. It's everything at the high school. It's going to be new track, new field, new performing arts center, new classrooms, new cafeteria, really tangible things that new students or recruits will be able to see and touch. And it is the positive kind of word of mouth that's out there in the wider community, and just translates into momentum, which should translate into a continued to increase enrollment.
Great. Kristen?
I think we have an opportunity going ahead to strengthen our RTI system / the MTSS system, as it's now being called at the state level. I think that we've got a lot of opportunities in front of us, perhaps financially with any of the ESSER funds, but yeah, I think we have some great opportunities with that.
Great. Lisa or Meredith?
Two things to add to what folks have said about data. I think that, as Meredith pointed out, the fact that the NWEA is K to 11, and that it is the state assessment, which gives it an ethos that it doesn't have as strictly an in-district assessment, combined with the fact that on the supervision and evaluation group, we are including in a revision an educator inquiry project that encourages educators to broaden their understanding of data and the types of data that we see as valid inquiry instruments. And so, really not just, instructionally, but across the district, really deepening our engagement with data, broadening the reach of it and using it in meaningful ways, I think is a huge opportunity. The other opportunity is with our new hire for Chapter 104. We have begun digging into the question of how a district that by state mandate can only identify 3 to 5% of students as gifted and talented, but in which at some grade levels and in some content areas, we have, over half of students achieving above the 80th percentile. We've begun digging into the question of how we can serve our high achieving students in a way that really reconsiders and revises that traditional model of Chapter 104 services and reimagines it in a way that brings it to every student who could benefit from it.
Great.
Brian, I
Anybody?
don't know if you're seeing in the chat,
I
Laura's
was-
added some comments.
Yeah, Laura's put that, so I was just going to add those in if everybody else was done with opportunities. So I think we caught her strengths, weaknesses. We had let's see,
The
we had
after
the
school
leadership.
care would be addition.
Yeah, and we had the after school care. And I think I had mentioned parent volunteers, which also got mentioned. And weaknesses, we had communication come up again. No, I'm sorry. That's weaknesses, opportunities, small class size. I'll just add meeting each kid where they're at. I think captured it, and there were some threats up above, which we'll get to too. So we're on to threats. We got about 20 minutes. I'd like to leave at least 5 to start to list some goals, but so we'll try and keep this focused. But Jake, what have you got for threats?
Yeah, so obviously you mentioned before, COVID is kind of the common tie through all this, but obviously COVID is the largest threat we face if conditions take a turn for the worse. But the other thing that that is troublesome to me to some degree is the fact that I can't help but think inflation is already upon us and is only going to get worse in regards to, look at how much we're paying for things now and what's that going to do? What kind of impact is that going to have on our budget moving forward? And what kind of impact is that going to have on the funding that we receive from governmental agencies as well? So those are the 2 that I had.
Okay, Mark?
I'll hop in here because I had something that really follows up on that well, which is, I thought that in terms of threats and funding and, cost increases, I think that one of the challenges we have is that because so much of our revenue is based on property taxes, it makes it very difficult to raise the funding we need if we're hit with, it makes it hard to ask our neighbors for the extra funding that we need when we know that it's a property tax-based system, is what I'm trying to say. And I think that one thing I didn't say under opportunities that maybe I can just go in here is that if we work with legislators to reform the funding system for schools, so it's more of an income-based system rather than a property tax-based system, that would allow us to know that when we look for increased funding, that we're not affecting the people who can least afford it.
Okay. Mark?
I've got 3 threats. I'll go through them real quickly. One is again, COVID related. But I think in particular, I think we need to, everybody's put in a lot of time and a lot of effort and is kind of maxed out from this year. And we're going to have the summer to rest and recharge, but I do worry about kind of post-COVID burnout. I mean, change in COVID circumstances for the worse would be obviously a threat too. But I think tying into the psychological well-being, I think we have to be on guard for that and provide resources as best we can to prevent that. So that's one. Two is, it whether we like it or not, we're headed for a state election cycle relatively soon, and depending on how that turns out, education policy could take another dramatic swing, right? I mean, we've just had one pretty big swing in funding. It could go the other way just as easily after 2022. So I think, not that we can control that, but we have to plan for that. So that's a threat. And then again, nothing that we can do really about this, but whenever you have an important leadership position turnover, as we are at the high school, that's a threat, right? I mean, we could get a great replacement for Reg, or we could get a less than great replacement. And that's obviously a threat that we have to be on board with.
Yep. Patrick, anything else you wanted to add?
No, I was looking at the way you put down leadership hires.
Yeah, it's clearly an opportunity as well.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, it goes both ways.
yep. Yeah, I don't think I had anything else. I'll just double down on COVID burnout. I think it's going to be very real for the coming year.
Yeah, that was one of mine, but also something it's really been a growing concern is workforce shortage, and it kind of goes hand in hand with burnout. And workforce shortage is a real challenge for us and everyone right now.
Okay. Going out into the audience, Richard.
Yeah, similar to what's been said, but I think a different twist. I think we have I don't know what the numbers are, but we have a good number of staff that are probably approaching retirement age, and the turnover and replacement of the institutional knowledge and the experience of those individuals, especially given a workforce shortage that seems to be looming, may be a challenge for us.
Okay. Yep. Reg.
Yeah, I mean, it's not meant to be self-serving, but it is around what Mark said around leadership hire, and specifically at the high school, there's a lot of opportunity, but I'll just share my experience so far has been, since I resigned, it's been sorry to see you go. Next. There hasn't been a lot of curiosity around why, beyond, well, he's got a superintendent job. That's why he's leaving. But so I think there could be more curiosity around why there is turnover at the principal level, and trying to get a better understanding of that.
Yeah, I mean, you're basically talking about the notion of exit interviews, getting more information out of that. Yep. Okay. Yeah, Kristen?
I think I would just echo the workforce shortage. I remember when I first went into administration and we put out a position on serving schools, and I would have a pile like this of applications to go through. And it worries me that it seems to be shrinking every time we do put out something. So that's my worry.
Yep. Lisa or Meredith?
I think that a concern that I have is our either our remote students who are going to be returning to school, or students in pre-K or kindergarten for whom the pandemic has really dominated, a huge chunk of their lives in a way that leaves them without some of the socialization and communication skills that students typically have at that age, and potentially increases for students who have been remote, and anxiety around being around others and being in school. And I think that is something that is going to be a real factor for us next year.
Okay. Anybody else want to go? And we've got Laura's in the chat, but anybody who's attending is welcome to jump in if they want. At this point, we'll take any of strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, or threats. All right, not hearing any. So the board, we have a chance to talk about this in the next meeting. So I think I'd like to start with non-board members. Anything that you would, So remember, we have these kind of overarching goals about student achievement. We have these specific goals that are really, I think, are just board rules. They map pretty tightly to the statute and responsibilities of the board in terms of finances and policies and things. But I think we're mostly focused here on 1 year kind of goals, or maybe they're 2 or 3 year, but short-term goals that are not the overarching kind of background values and role of the board that we'd like to see the district really take on as a priority. And most years we've said 5 to 7. We've always found 7 to be a bit overly ambitious. I don't think we've ever achieved 7. Achieving 5 has been a pretty darn good year. And last year we really just set 2.5 because we knew COVID and construction were going to be overwhelming. So I'm not sure where we are on what's the right number this year, but it's probably not 7, having just talked about COVID burnout. But let's go ahead and get some goals. Anybody want to throw some goals out?
I would offer one. I think the board's done a nice job with their fiscal responsibility, and to continue to do that, giving the post-COVID, the unknowns of the post-COVID economy. You know, I think some of the concerns, inflation for one, is brought up, and so I think we just need to be cognizant and careful planning to maintain a strong budget within the district in the coming years.
Okay. Anybody else not on the board want to jump in?
It's not really a goal, but I would say, please don't focus on learning loss. I think the focus needs to be on, gosh, the opportunities that were presented this last year. We grew a ton as a community around, like we said earlier, resilience, perseverance, confidence, flexibility, adaptability. Stick with that goal of meeting students where they are, and just really on the opportunities that we see at the end of this COVID.
Yeah, I thought your OHS Weekend Preview captured that approach nicely this week. Any other goals people would put out?
I would suggest engaging families in the development of a shared vision about the role of technology in education.
Okay. So that's one thing, engaging families in development of shared vision of technology?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Any others? Okay, we'll go ahead and start getting a list from board members too. Jake, anything you want to put on there?
Yeah, I'm looking at our 2021 board goals on the side of the agenda here, and I don't know if they necessarily change all that much. I mean, I think we still have to have an eye on COVID. I know it's against what Reg said, but the educational end of it, and even in something that's not on our board goal for 2020, 2021 is the SEL, social emotional learning end of it as well. So I think, to some degree, we have to have something related to COVID, I would think, on the goals for the next year. I agree with what Richards had said about finances, although that's a goal from this past year as well. But I feel like we really do need to keep an eye on that, maybe for a different reason. Last year it was obviously COVID related, and to this next year it may be inflation related. And then obviously the construction project, we need to see that through. If I'm correct, I think everything wraps up January of 22, right?
The external contractor stuff does. Some of the self-managed stuff drags on for maybe another year or two, but the small stuff. Yep.
So we'll still be dealing with fairly significant construction through the next year. And then I like what Meredith had said about engaging families in the the use of technology and how we do that in the district.
Mark?
I'm gonna have to agree with Jake again. I don't really necessarily see that the overall goals have really changed all that much. I think we're dealing with different elements of the same thing. I mean, now we're hoping at least that we're not nearing the end of COVID, but COVID is more of a malingering nuisance than a widespread pandemic. So we have to be ready for that to change, but we also, I think, have to shift. We're still focusing on COVID, but we're focusing on how best to come out the other side of this. So I think COVID remains a goal. It's just maybe with a different focus. So I think that has to stay there. I think the same thing is true with construction, right? We're about half-ish, at least in terms of the money we've expended, done on this. So we've got half to go. But also we know we've got a long list of things that we still want to do with some funding that's left over, or things that we want to do that we can't fund with that. So we have to figure out how we're going to do that. So I think construction stays there, but again, it's maybe a different phase of that. And then I think technology use, that's probably the area we weren't able to do much on this year. I mean, obviously technology was everywhere this year, but in terms of a focused kind of approach, it was more of like, let's put it together on the fly based on what we have and what we think might work. And again, that the advantages of that is that we learn some stuff, but I think it makes the challenge of doing what Meredith described and it's not just engaging parents, it's really the entire community. And that's where we were headed pre-COVID, right? We were going to have this, we had did all this groundwork for this year-long, all stakeholder kind of process where everybody was going to weigh in on technology, and we were going to come to a district-wide consensus if we were able to. And that got snuffed out due to COVID. And now it's even a more complicated process, I think. And I think that I think the time has come, as we hopefully again put COVID in the rear view, that has to be front and center. So given the size of all three of those goals, I don't know that we could add anything beyond that. I mean, I'm certainly open to it, but those, if it were me, that would be the three I would put on, and I probably wouldn't add much more.
Patrick?
Yeah, just on the COVID thing, I would just say that in addition to kind of our exit plan, right? Just to kind of put something in there that says, and make sure we are in a position where we're kind of on our way to the exit plan. So make sure that as we, are seeing gains in immunization and decreased caseloads locally, that we are well positioned as a district so that we aren't impacted by another wave that comes through, to make sure our immunization levels are high and we're doing the testing we need to make sure that we're not surprised by something and kind of blindsided by another wave. And then, kind of what Mark was just talking about community engagement was my other point, was that just as we start to move forward, really get back to a place of community engagement.
Okay. The only thing, I agree with the basic point that we got a lot on our plate. The only thing I think that's got a timeliness component to it is we heard a lot of things related to recruitment. And I think, a lot of this belongs at the high school and the high school principal and the high school recruiting team. And they certainly manage all the mechanics of going to schools and hopefully in real life having step up nights and those kinds of things. But I think we identified a number of opportunities that are somewhat unique to this year. My thing about the college is not unique to this year, but it's a little bit unique just because the schedule is getting rejiggered again. But some of the other things about really, there's a 1 year opportunity or window around recruitment. So I think I would put that on the list as well. Meredith, anything you would put on?
Yeah, last year when we generated these goals, we really had not yet dug into the equity work and DEI, and I think that's going to be a major part of not just, it's going to hit all stakeholders in terms of what we're doing next year. So I think that should be on the list. I think a lot of the themes of our conversation, as I look back through what we have here, some of the wording can be tweaked. Like, I think under the ongoing fundamental responsibilities section where we say hire excellent staff, I think maybe retain and hire excellent staff would capture kind of a theme of some of the conversation today. And then under COVID, I think specific, I think maybe Richard said this at some point and others did as well, but the funding management, both with just the, what's happening in the economy and budget that comes in, but also, funding cliffs with relief funds. So that's a really nuanced part of the COVID funding piece. So that's the only other things I would add.
Okay, I think that was a very efficient meeting. Thank you, everybody, for participating. So again, the board will try and home this into a candidate set of goals later in the meeting, 6 o'clock meeting. And then we'll kind of have that available for comment for 2 weeks until the June 22nd meeting. So I think we'll go ahead and take a 3-minute break before the 6 o'clock meeting. And we'll see you all then. And thank you for participating.
All right, thanks everyone. Just a heads up, if my internet boots out again, I'm going to hop in the car and drive straight down and join you in person. So I don't anticipate that being an issue, but if it is, I'll be 10 minutes to get there door to door.
Okay, sounds like a plan. Yep. All right, thank you, everybody, for coming. Go ahead and call the meeting to order. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Would all who wish join me? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Guess I would just add, it's not too late to vote. They're open till 8 o'clock tonight. Let's see. We have one agenda adjustment, which is to add a vote on paving projects. We also need to accept a resignation of a board member, but I'll just do that right after the agenda adjustments, which is where board organization usually comes. So I would make a motion to add 8F, approve change events for paving projects. Is there a second?
A second.
Okay, any discussion? We'll go ahead and vote. Jake,
Aye.
Patrick,
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
I also vote aye. And we did receive, I know it's out in the community, even advertised, but on the town council website, but we did receive a resignation from Aaron Ellis from the board. So I think it would be a good parliamentary practice for the body to recognize the resignation. So I would motion to recognize Aaron Ellis's resignation with regret. Is there a second?
I second.
Any discussion? We'll vote. Jake
Aye.
and Patrick,
Aye.
Mark? I also vote aye. She certainly has been put a lot of service in. I think she must be up around 5 years or somewhere close to that. And will be sorely missed. She brought a valued voice to the table. For those of you who are interested in the position, the town Facebook webpage is advertised. The town council replaces the position until the next March election. So they have put an advertisement up, and I think they're trying to get something done in late June or early July. So check with the town for more details. Okay, next up, we have a consideration of minutes for the May 25th. I would make a motion to approve. This was, I would make a motion to approve the May 25th minutes as presented. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, any discussion or corrections? We'll go ahead and vote. Jake,
Aye.
Patrick,
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
I also vote aye. Next up, we have warrants. I would make a motion to approve payroll warrant 24, regular warrant 24, and construction bond warrant 38. Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right, any discussion? We'll vote. Jake,
Aye.
Patrick,
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
I also vote aye. Next up, we're open to public comment. Would anybody like to speak?
Hi, this is Catherine Thibodeau. Can I speak?
Please go ahead.
Okay, I was trying to get on my laptop, but I wasn't fast enough. I was coming home from work, so you have my cell phone. I would just, I'd like to speak a little bit to, I think it's later on in your discussion. I don't know exactly what the topics are going to be, but related to the school's COVID response and decision-making around outdoor mask use. In my reading of the DOE guidance, masks are not necessarily required or listed as an expectation outside. And my understanding is it's certain activities within the school setting during the day and after school, specifically graduation, there is masking required. And so I would ask that to be a discussion item. I am interested in knowing what the process the school board and the administration is going to go through to get on par with the DOE guidance. And I think I did send you all an email about my request regarding graduation. I have been observing other graduations, including the middle school graduation last night. And Herman graduation, John Bapp's graduation, there were not limitations on numbers. And 8 might seem like a large number for families, but then given, adding in grandparents, adding in step parents, adding in siblings, many families are seeking extra tickets and are not having enough, even with 8, to meet the needs. So, why is 8 still required outside? And, why is masking still required in certain situations outside? I know there's concerns going into the summer program with kids being outside on the playground and still needing to mask during that time. So I hope that there's a discussion on it, and I'll be listening.
Okay, thank you. We're definitely going to talk about COVID policies in general. Summer, I think, is on the agenda. I'm not sure if graduation was on this agenda, but I'll see if I can remember to at least address that again when we get there. Any other public comment? Seeing no other public comment, we'll move forward with acknowledgements. Jake.
Yep, I would just acknowledge the Orono Middle School and Orono High School in their production of 15 Reasons Not to Be in a Play. They did 2 showings of that last week outdoors, and it was good to see some resemblance of a little bit more normal activity for them. So it was good.
Patrick?
Yeah, I'd like to acknowledge and thank everyone at the elementary school at Ace Adams who was involved with both field day and water slide day. Got the best reviews of school so far this year, and that's hard to beat because our child is very excited about school. So that was a pretty awesome thing you did, and thanks.
Mark?
I'd just like to acknowledge all the students who are having their end of the year performances in the arts, and also end of the year performances, and some that are still ongoing for all of our student athletes. So fine work by all of them.
Yeah, let's see if I have anything to add to that. Yeah, just students wrapping up, and yeah, we're very, very close, knock on wood, but it's been a heck of a year, but I think it's a year that we're all proud of, and the teachers and staff should be proud, the students and the parents should be proud, the administrators should be proud. So just, we've said it throughout the year, but a deep gratitude for a really amazing, in some ways, a really wonderful year. Thank you. Meredith, anything you want to add?
Yeah, I have 2. I think you probably said this when you acknowledged Erin's resignation from the board, but I just wanted to acknowledge, her contributions over. She joined the board, I think early in my first year here, and her involvement has been meaningful, committed, and particularly through the last 2 years with negotiation, she's been an integral part of the board team, and so we're going to miss her. And I just wanted to acknowledge her contributions during this time. I also wanted to acknowledge all members of the school community for yesterday and today for making the most of the uncomfortable temps. It was good timing for the water slide and for, I think, the 8th grade pool party today, but otherwise, it was warm, but everyone really took lots of breaks, lots of, ventilation running and hydration. So there was meaningful learning happening, and it was, just everyone pulling together to say we can do this. So I'm appreciative of the spirit that everyone brought to yesterday and today.
Great, thank you. Next, we'll move to reports. And I was just looking, I don't see Hasnain at the minute, the student rep, but he was here earlier. So Hasnain, if if you come in, we'll put you after the principal and before the superintendent reports, but we'll start with principals. Kristen, you want to go first?
Sure, thank you. Yeah, it's been a warm couple of days, to say the least. So yesterday we did have our water slide, and I know that wasn't in my board report because we had moved it from Friday to Monday, and in hindsight, that was a really, really smart move. It was wonderful. This was my first experience with it, and the Orono Fire Department, they just did a fantastic job getting everything there for us and helping, set everything up. And just, it was so much fun. And yes, I did go down. I waited till the very end, and I did go down though. We had ASA Field Day on June 2nd, last Wednesday, and that was also amazing. We had all kinds of different games, team memory, giant ring toss, disc golf. And once again, I was in a water balloon event. I think Mrs. Earhart's got me in all the water balloon events because today, during our 5th grade celebration, I was again in a water balloon event. The 5th graders were catapulting water balloons at me. So anyway, that was lots of fun. And I have not complained actually at all about all the water activities. As far as collaboration with families, Mrs. Earhart and I have been welcoming kindergarten students and families to join us. We had 3 Zoom meetings last week where we welcomed families and we talked a little bit about what to expect in kindergarten and at ASA in particular. We had a slideshow to kind of show them some pictures and things until we can get back into the building. And so that was a great chance for parents to ask lots of questions and help us make our slideshow and our presentation better even for next year. All NWEA testing is finished for the entire school. It was great. Last Wednesday and then 2 Wednesdays before that, I was able to make it work so that our remote students could come in and also participate in that in a safe environment. And so that worked out really well. It was exciting to see them. And let's see, what else have we got? Oh, today, just to top off the 5th grade celebration, the slideshow at the end of the day. Wow, that was so amazing to be able to see everything from the 5th graders' baby pictures all the way up to, yesterday's water slide was awesome to see. So yeah, we've had a great few weeks here.
Great, thank you. Any questions or comments? Richard, you want to go next?
Most definitely, yeah. So this time of year is always a lot of fun, and it's with end of the year celebrations, culminating activities, and kind of seeing your work through at this time of year. So we've had a lot of things going on in the last 2 weeks at OMS. We've had the Scholar Leader Celebration as part of the New England League of Middle Schools. We nominated 2 students, Zoe McLaughlin and Ben Sedelko. We recognized them last evening at our 8th grade recognition ceremony. But Zoe and Ben and I attended a virtual meeting this year on May 25th with other scholar leaders from around the state. That was a lot of fun. And our end of the year celebrations are going strong. Last evening we held to a packed basketball court out back, I guess, at our 8th grade recognition ceremony. And it was, I think all but 5 or 6 students attended out of the 61. And it was a lot of fun. Despite the heat, it was a lot of fun. And what else? We have had, wrapping up into the year, things like laptop collection, and we did that today with our 8th graders. We had the pool party for our 8th graders today, and video slideshow celebration, things like that. Our field day is planned for tomorrow for all grades, and we've got a variety of activities outside. So fortunately, I think it's going to look up a little cooler tomorrow. On June 1st, we had a 5th grade step-up night, a nice collaborative effort between OMS and ASA. Mr. Buhner and Mrs. Earhart, I give them much of the credit for getting that organized. That included numerous trips by 5th graders to OMS and a virtual step-up night where parents could learn more about OMS. And we had a Q&A session as well on June 1st. Our ongoing project with Russian and Ukrainian schools culminated in my getting a new hat that says captain on Ukrainian on the front of it. So that was a lot of fun. But more seriously, we had several video conferences with schools in both Moscow and Kiev, and those were a lot of fun. And we involved, I don't have a number for you, but a lot of students came early in the morning for those. We had Gabriel Frey, Native American basket maker, was presenting to sixth graders on May 28th out here on the lawn by the pool. That was a lot of fun. And the work that goes into those is just incredible. Hours and hours and hours of work. So that was really nice to see. We are working on student groupings and schedule. I'd say those are mostly finalized, but just some tweaks that will need to be made. So those are things that have been happening. NWA testing, as Kristen noted, is completed during the week of May 17th, and that was a good effort. And hats off, this has already been said, but the OMS OHS drama performances were incredible. I particularly enjoyed the scenes and songs performances. Those were very good. And kudos to our OMS A baseball team for capturing the Penobscot Valley Middle League Championship on June 3rd last week. That was against Center Drive. That was a lot of fun, that game. So a lot going on and a lot of celebrations this time of year.
I was muted, sorry. Thank you. Any other questions or comments? We'll go ahead with Reg.
All right. A lot going on. I just want to first acknowledge our two graduation speakers. We don't recognize a valedictorian or salutatorian. We recognize the top 10 GPAs, and the seniors select from that list, as well as the graduates with distinction, to pick two graduation speakers. And so Anna Drinkert and Liam Farrell were chosen to speak at graduation. And we typically have a teacher speak at baccalaureate. We don't really have baccalaureate this year, so Don Joseph was chosen to speak at graduation. I also want to mention Anna Drinkert received an appointment to the U.S. Naval Academy, and she has decided, she's accepted that and will attend in the fall. So that's a really big deal to go to one of the service academies. Just piggyback off Richard, great, really want to recognize Cammie and John and the rest of the drama crew for putting on the both performances, the scenes and songs and the 15 Reasons Not to Be in a Play. In all year, they just have done an amazing job making sure we had drama performances at the high school. Tomorrow's the last day of school. We are going to have an underclass awards ceremony. We're going to be kind of in person. The book award recipients, the underclass book recipients, will be in the gym and receive that. And we're going to live stream that back to the classrooms. And so the students in the classrooms can watch that. Thursday night, we're all ready to go. It's senior award night at the drive-in. It was a great time last year. It's about an hour-long tribute video that we play, and that's all good to go. It's been tested out by the drive-in. So that's going to be really fun. On Friday, Becky Cash, the senior class advisors, organized a senior trip down to Sand Beach and Bar Harbor. Unfortunately, it's like going to be the chilliest day of the week, but it'll still be great. And then that night, we're going to have Ocella. This was something we did a couple of years ago, but it's an outdoor kind of open mic night. There'll be games, refreshments, some concessions from Roma Joe's. And then finally, graduation on Sunday. The weather, fingers crossed, is looking good so far. One thing that I wanted to bring up maybe for later when we talk about COVID is around the chair arrangements outside. The original graduation guidelines indicated kind of setting up chairs in kind of family or traveling party groups, and those groups be separated. At that time, it was 6 feet. And I'd like to actually just have, eliminate those groups and just have the chairs spaced 3 feet apart. So it's more of an open seating arrangement instead of seating in pods. We can talk more, but we can talk more later when we get there. Onward, we're in the middle of laptop collection. We got all the seniors the last couple, well, all except for about 7. During marching practice yesterday and today, we did underclassmen today. We're picking up remote students are dropping off laptops and books tomorrow. Once the laptops are inventoried, collected, updated, everything IT needs to do, we do have a list of students that are taking either UMaine classes or AP work over the summer. So they'll be allowed to have a laptop for the summer. We did our main science exam last Wednesday, and which, Wednesdays are usually a full remote day. And so we asked the juniors to come in and take that. I was really pleased with not just the turnout, but the execution of it. We had about 80% who successfully completed the exam. And so that really, I wasn't sure what to expect, but that was higher than I expected. We had a great, yesterday was our first go around. With all teachers administering the NUIA reading for grades 9, 10, and 11, and we had about 78%. That includes remote students. So 78% of the underclassmen were tested yesterday. And so I was also pleased with that. And I don't have the math results because I have to wait until midnight for those. I also want to mention, the College Board has been great this spring. They've offered 3 different test windows. They've been super flexible, but it's been a huge task for us and for guidance to organize and administer those. I want to really acknowledge Troy Wagstaff as our AP test coordinator and the rest of our guidance staff. It's usually a 2-week job and it stretched into a 6-week job. We really had good participation. 115 students took 197 exams in 11 different subject areas. And so that's only slightly off, 5 or 10% off from what a normal year would look like. So really pleased there. I'll just mention, for NEASC, 2 of our teachers, Margie Innes and Jen Branchflower, will be the NEASC accreditation coordinators. And they attended an initial workshop along with Meredith Diamond back in May. And then there's really no summer work. There's nothing to do until the fall. So we're in good shape there. And then finally, I shared the SAT results from April. We had 45 juniors take it. It wasn't required this year. And you can review that data again. I look at the average test scores in reading and math, and then the benchmarks well above the national and the state. So I was really pleased to see that. And again, there's just a lot of data out there that is suggesting don't focus on the learning loss. Our kids are okay academically. Let's really focus on the SEL piece and kind of rebuilding our school community. That's it. That's all I've got for you.
Thanks, Reg. Any questions or comments for Reg?
I don't have any questions. I do have 2 comments. One is I was remiss in not mentioning during acknowledgements the great job that the middle school pulled off on 8th grade recognition last night. It was a great event outdoors. Fortunately, Richard brought that up, so it wasn't so bad. But also I was remiss in not mentioning all the work that went in by Leslie Winchester and the students for prom. There was a huge amount of work. Prom went off without a hitch. Even though there was a lot of stuff stacked against it, state track meet, threat of bad weather, there was a lot of anxiety, and it sounds like prom was a big hit. Students had a good time. So I thank everybody that worked on that as well.
Yeah, I meant to mention the prom. I forgot that. Leslie Winchester did an amazing job. It was an incredible setup. The tent, the outdoor tables, kids had a blast. It's been 2 years since we've had one, and really a great night.
Yeah, she's absolutely fabulous.
She is amazing.
All right. And I would just note at least in the normal order of things, this would be your last principal report. So just wanted to recognize that and again, appreciate and acknowledge the 5 great years you've given at the high school. Okay, next up, if you're ready, Hasnain, we have the student report.
All right, so normally I'd give general updates on 3 schools, but that's been all covered for. So I'm just going to present 5 concerns from the student body, and I'm just going to read them out as is instead of just summarizing them because they're quite short. So number 1 says keeping mask breaks into next year, even though we might not have to wear masks in class next year, or not all of us. We should be able to take a 5 to 10 minute break from class. The second one says, I do want to encourage the mask requirement lifted for the upcoming school year, and possibly instead request a mandatory vaccination or carrying on with social distancing. And I do believe with students coming up to the middle school and middle schoolers moving to the high school, they should have a semi-normal school experience. The third one is just a question. How are you going to keep kids safe playing sports without masks? The fourth one says, I believe that some teachers are cramming work in, especially in around May, which is, during the time of AP exams. And during this time, most of the students in a class are taking multiple AP exams. And the last one says, we should keep the current high school class schedule we have right now.
Okay. I'm typing these down. This feeds well into the board goals that we were just talking about in the workshop. So I've got those captured to feed into the discussion later today about goals as well. So I've got the student input captured. Thank you. All right, next up we have the superintendent report.
Well, I'd just like to thank you, Hasnain, for bringing those forward from your classmates. And some of those actually feed into one of the items that's a little further down on the agenda, and that's summer planning as we look to next year. And so we're going to talk about our process this summer and what the planning will look like for that. And so some of that feedback will be helpful to have in that process, and also a student voice in the process. So before we get down to that agenda item, though, a couple of things I wanted to just remind everyone about. There's been a lot of planning around our summer programming this summer, and I think we're almost at a point where we have enrollment wrapped up. That's been an ongoing process in our collaboration with UMaine and also with families for our RSU program. And so we have the RSU program that's here on site is June 28th through July 29th. And then there's kind of a wraparound program that is helping us expand programming this summer, as we've talked about in previous meetings, in our partnership with UMaine, and that is with the town RAD program. And so the wraparound program starts on June 21st and goes through the last week before school starts. August 27th is the last day. And that's for K-5. And then for middle school, the wraparound RAD part is a Friday component. And so it looks a little different for that age level. And I want to acknowledge, the work of a lot of people to try to pull up something that is different than what we typically offer in a year, where I, talked about during the board goal setting, workforce shortage is a major challenge for us. Not just workforce shortage, but also just our facility and what's going to be going on in it this summer. So Lisa and Meredith have done the heavy lifting on this. Seamus McKay was brought on board to help coordinate the logistics as we plan the details. And then, all of the staff who are involved with planning their programming that they're offering here, and certainly the staff of UMaine, namely Christy Deshane and Dale's last name, Dale Russell, with Brad Camp have been super partners for us with this. Along with that, the summer construction that's happening here is significant. I just wanted to we have a item kind of at the end under subcommittee reports, but I really want to highlight here when we have more of an audience, just how much stuff is happening this summer, even outside of what our general contractor is doing this summer. So our general contractor is doing a big portion of their work this summer because some of the projects have to be done when we're not in regular school 5 days a week. For example, at ASA, two of the components are to upgrade all of the classroom bathrooms and classroom sinks to ADA accessibility standards. And so that means every single classroom, with the exception of the fifth grade, the fifth grade classrooms don't have bathrooms. And then the first and second grade classrooms at the very end don't have bathrooms, but every sink, the classroom has a sink. So the whole building will be under construction this summer. And the summer programming that's down there is going to be working around that. We're going to have to be flexible and continue to perhaps move at times around the building. But that's just one example of how widespread the construction is. And then we have our own projects that we're doing as a part of some of the state SREF awards, sprinkler head replacement at ASA, new security camera systems at both schools, new door signage and status switches at both schools, science room shutoffs, gas shutoffs at the high school. We have some changes that we will do as a result of shuffling around at ASA back into the office. We have to kind of retrofit the room that was made for the office back to a classroom, and then lots of moving that happens at ASA. Up here at the high school, the cafeteria will start to be renovated by, I forget the 14th is the day we're turning that over to them. And then a lot of the other projects, SREF projects around the high school, like the life skills room down at the high school, adding ADA restroom. And then the office project will get started. That's a little further down the agenda on the 21st. So, a lot of things happening. And part of that, as the contractors connect our new transformers at both schools, involves a short shutdown of electricity to buildings. And they've given us their scheduled time for this, with the caveat that if construction delays and weather delays have an impact, it could shift. But right now, it looks like ASA's downtime is going to be June 21st through 23rd. So that's 3 days, and they had previously told us 5 days. So that's an improvement. And that's before our RSU 26 summer programming gets started, which is also really helpful. At OHS, they had previously told us it would be OMS and OHS actually. They had previously told us it would be a 2-week shutdown, up to 2-week shutdown. And they're telling us now it looks like 5 days, and it is in the middle of July 12th through 16th. So we're talking with summer school staff to determine kind of how to respond to that. Lisa has been in communication with them. I think they're looking like they're going to carry on with some outdoor programming and programming that is, destination, taking kids off site and using that week for some of those types of activities. Bathrooms will still be available here, and we can, there's not a lot of room to flex down to ASA with programming. ASA, we're really maxing it out with what we have going on there and all the construction. So we're still in the planning process for what to do with that week. We really, I think the teachers feel like flipping it to the week at the end is not something that's as desirable for them. I think it's part of our workforce shortage is kind of like, let's make a deal about keeping people engaged with summer school and figuring out how to make this work under all of these different circumstances. So I think they're just, like we talked about earlier, thinking outside the box, trying to consider, what can they do during that time and still provide that week of programming. So, a lot happening this summer, and one of the challenges is going to be getting all the construction projects completed, doing our normal summer cleaning and floor process, and moving everyone is going to be super challenging, and something might not happen. Like, some of the floors might not get done by the time school starts. It all depends on when things are turned back over to us. So that's just something that we're going to have to watch over the course of the summer, and see how things progress and what we get turned over to us. As Brian's talked about previously, when we've had the construction report, Bowman has a hard and fast date that they have to turn certain elements back over to us, or there are penalties in the contract, I think, around that, unless there are, reasons outside of their control that are in the contract language that they can cite as reasons for delays. But, so far they're really doing well with being on schedule. So I don't have any reason to think that they wouldn't be on schedule with the main parts of the project. I know the SREF parts of the project, i.e. the bathrooms and sinks at ASA, are really going to be challenging to wrap up. And so I think that's also part of our challenge with moving people down there. And we want to wait till it's at a certain point to be able to move things in, and we can't move until the office gets turned over to us. So there's just a lot of moving parts. And I just wanted to spend some time illustrating that. So if someone in the community sees that, the school's not open one week, this is why there's, construction happening, and we'll probably have staff, working remotely those weeks as much as we can. I think that's all I wanted to mention in my report. Everything else is coming up down further in the agenda. Any questions though?
All right, on to COVID update. Sounds like, so we have MPA guidance and fall on the agenda, but which includes summer planning, but sounds like we had a couple of requests to at least retouch on graduation as well, so.
Right, yeah, we can go with that now or do that after the first two, either way. So let's talk about MPA guidance and get that started. Since we last met, the MPA came out with a statement that said, I can't remember the exact phrasing, but basically all sports were coming back. I think, the sports specifically that were excluded, tackle football and wrestling. I think those were the only two that were excluded, because volleyball was moved, right? Volleyball did happen. That they are coming back. But that's really all that we have received so far. What we learned today is they're working on some guidance as they have in the past for schools, specifically for summer programming. It's not available yet. And so Mike has started obviously planning summer with coaches, and things are being advertised. And until we get that guidance, I really feel like we should just keep our current plan in place. We meet again in 2 weeks. And that will allow us, really the only change that I, am hoping there'll be more guidance around is around the indoor aspects of basketball, because that's where I think there's the most uncertainty from where we were when we previously had indoor sports and where we are now. The outdoor guidance has really shifted, and we shifted with it to say masks not required when, only when distance can't be maintained when you're not actively playing. And so I think, that still holds as applicable. But I would like to see what the guidance looks like to come out, and then have us look at it and decide as a group how we want to respond to that for our programming. Mike advertised this week, and it went out in the weekend preview, all the summer conditioning dates and times, and they're starting to advertise some of the youth camps that will be happening. So those are really the two types of activities we need to think about. I guess a third type is spectators at some of the events. So there's the conditioning part, but and then the summer camps that we have for younger kids, and then the mainly basketball that we might host games, and then football has stuff away. We don't host that though. It's away, I think. So those really wouldn't be our roles. Are you thinking of something else, Mark?
There'll be soccer games. I don't know that we'd be hosting. Usually in the past, those have been done at Hamden. I'm not sure, or Herman. I'm not sure if that's still true, but there will be soccer games. Field hockey has some activities. I don't know if those will be able to be here because of construction or not, but basketball is the one that's certain. Football will be unable to host, obviously, but the other ones, I think there's at least a possibility that we could.
So I think those are the areas that we need to think about. But, I think that the parameters that we've set around outdoor, I think those will hold true, and they really match what I think the community guidance is around masking. So the key for me is looking at what the guidance is around indoor and considering that. Any questions or comments about that at this point?
I think it obviously makes sense to wait till the guidance comes out before we do anything with it. I would note that there'll be but between when the guidance comes out, when our summer activities start, and when we meet again, that'll be a week where the athletes would be engaging in activities before we have a chance to act on the new guidance. I don't think it would make much difference anywhere besides the possibility of indoor workouts for basketball, right? I mean, those kids, depending on if it's boys or girls, would have either 2 or maybe up to as many as 4 days that first week under the current rules, which may look different, but I guess that's unavoidable since the MPA didn't come out with the guidance. There's nothing we can do about it. I would say if MPA comes out and removes mask requirements for indoor athletes and it's hot like it was this week, we might want to look at what that means for our basketball kids next week, but I guess we'll cross that bridge when we come to it.
Because I've got a question. The indoor basketball program, what age group is that in?
It's high school for conditioning and games, but there's a week that each program, the boys program, the girls program, provide a summer camp, basketball clinic camp for
grades
elementary.
Grades 4 through 8.
Grades 4 through 8. So that's why I said I think we need to consider that as a separate type of consideration from the high school student athletes conditioning and playing.
Yeah, I agree that those are, in my mind, I differentiate between populations of students that are eligible for immunization and populations that are not. So if we've got, like a 4 through 8 program, you've got, 4th and 5th, rising 4th, 5th, and 6th graders who are not eligible to be immunized at this point. And I think that is maybe a different way of looking at things for that group. I think there's a big difference between school year and summer also, because one of the concerns I have with school year is that student athletes are then returning to classrooms, whereas during the summer, you're making a choice for your own child, and the kids are making the choices about what their risk tolerance is, and then they're not necessarily going right back into a classroom with kids and parents and families that have made the decision not to participate because of the risk. So I'd be willing to be more supportive of the current policies that we have for elective summer programs, certainly. But I also agree that, waiting on the MPA guidelines, seeing what they actually say is important. I read a blurb, I forget where it was, but the MPA referenced following US CDC guidelines. And so it'll be interesting to me if they make any differentiation between vaccinated and unvaccinated student athletes, because the CDC certainly still does that, even if the state of Maine isn't making that distinction.
Yeah, you bring up a good point that the state, and I can't remember if we talked about this the last meeting, that the state has removed all of the community sports guidelines from, existence now. And we're just supposed, or I guess community sports programs are supposed to look at CDC guidance. And so when I looked at that a week and a half or so ago, it looks like that hadn't been updated, but maybe it has now. So that will be interesting to see if there's some updated guidance there.
Yeah, it would be interesting. I haven't seen anything from the US CDC that references summer programs yet. They were just talking about keeping the current policies in place for the remainder of this school year. But I think, the guidance for vaccinated individuals is pretty clear in terms of what they're saying is permissible for outdoor activities. And I think if we got a large proportion of students in our athletic programs who are vaccinated, that would be great,
Yeah,
that's all I've got to say about that.
I think that just kind of related to this and related to one of the items down the agenda, we're expecting a new set of, or not a new complete set, but an updated document of the school guidance that we were told should be coming out anytime. I'm not sure exactly what it's going to have as an update, but there was a suggestion that it might add a nuance around looking at vaccination rates for some of the protective factors that you can use that as a mitigation strategy with. So, it'll be interesting to see how that is going to play out, because there doesn't seem to be a state movement, at least in our conversations with the DOE, toward a requirement around vaccinations. And so I think that it would be an interesting strategy to try to use that and to see how they use that when they're not seeming to go to the required vaccination route. So I'm just not sure what that will look like, but I'm told something's coming and that it may have something to do with your rates. We sent out a new email today, or a follow-up email to families, just to remind families to submit their students' vaccination, or just to notify us so we can keep up-to-date data on what our rate is looking like. We got a good response when we sent out the survey to begin with, but I have a feeling that there's more that's happened since then that we don't have. And so that's just another plug. If you have one scheduled coming up, please do let us know when that has been completed for your child. So Jake, were you poised to say something? It looked like you were kind of, okay. When new MPA guidance comes out, it may be this Friday. I'll send that around to the board so you can see it. And, we'll have a follow-up discussion next meeting about this. And based on whatever the guidance says, we'll bring a recommendation that, that we would like to see around that for you guys for everyone to react to. Mike's in constant communication with his colleagues in the region, both in PVC and beyond. And so it'll be good to kind of see how everyone is reacting to the guidance. So this is going to be one of those issues that, we've talked about. The unraveling is going to be challenging. And so this is probably one of those junctures that's going to be challenging for folks.
The only other comment I want to make directly about this, just talking about the state of Maine, is that the other week I mentioned that, you know, the state guidelines are kind of, I see that as the minimum, and then whether or not you choose to do more or not is up to you as a school district. The way I've been thinking about this a lot lately is, you know, if the state doesn't want to mandate things, I understand that. But it's kind of like, you know, we don't have a motorcycle helmet requirement in the state of Maine. And that doesn't mean you shouldn't wear one. And if, you know, we had motorcycle riding as an extracurricular activity, I would want to require helmets, even though it's not required by state law. So, I mean, it's just because something's not required to me doesn't mean we shouldn't do it anymore. And that's kind of the way I think about a lot of these things.
So before we talk about planning for fall, I think it would be good to talk about, you know, what Reg brought up, wanting to talk to us about a new idea about graduation. I think we can also try to address some of what was mentioned in public comment around graduation at the same time. Reg, do you want to kind of pitch your idea?
Yeah, so, you know, if we wind up indoors, I think we should stick with, you know, the grouping, kind of the family pods. And, you know, we can change to 4-foot distancing, which allows us to go to 6 tickets indoors. But outdoors, my biggest concern is around families who are, you know, the parents might be divorced, and to ask them to sit together in this pod of 8 seats, where it might be difficult for them to do that. I think the idea of open seating just makes things more comfortable for people in that situation. So what I'd like to do is, if we're outdoors, not set up the chairs in pods of 8, but instead space the chairs 3 feet apart. And that's the reasoning. And so it would be unmasked 3 feet apart, you know, once people are seated outside. And then indoors, we'd maintain the grouping. We can do groups of 6, 4 feet apart. Masked, you know, indoors would be masked the entire time inside. Outdoors, masked while you're, you know, walking around, but once you're seated, you can be unmasked.
Have you looked at the space in terms of the, you know, size of the field and?
Yeah. Yep. We're fine with the spacing. And then I would just mention around the tickets, you know, it's certainly not uncommon for tickets to be used for graduation. We, you know, this would be a crowd of, you know, 70 families times 9, you know, 600 or 700 people out on the soccer field. So it would be considered a large event, you know, venue. But I know of families where 3 are coming, and, you know, that family would have 5 tickets left over if we go to this open seating concept, you know, if they're not required to sit as a pod. So that's how most schools handle kind of a ticket shortage, that, you know, it becomes kind of a market for tickets. Who has extra tickets? Can I have your tickets? So I don't see that number of tickets outdoors as an issue. We gave every senior 8 tickets. That should be more than enough to accommodate family needs.
Can I ask a clarifying question about that? So with the current plan, there are pods of 8, and then those pods are 6 feet apart from each other. Is that correct?
That was based on the original graduation guidelines that the state released back in March, but then those were retired, or they said sunsetted back at, you know, in May, you know, May 24th, I think. So, so we're not required to do the family pods. You know, the requirement was families and traveling parties would sit together and then be spaced 6 feet apart.
No, I wasn't asking about the requirement, but thank you for clarifying that because I didn't realize those had been sunsetted. But with our current plan, we were going to do the pods and then have each pod 6 feet apart. And what you're proposing is to do open seating with everyone 3 feet apart. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
I mean, I personally think it makes sense. You know, you think about a family and sitting in a row, their distances, you may end up with 2 people who are not in a pod that are 3 feet apart, but most people are still going to be more than 6 feet from other members of the family. And it does solve this ticket cap, which on the one hand is extremely common around the country, but on the other hand is not something we've always had to do in Orono. So it solves in the sense that kids can trade tickets if you're not having to sit in a pod solution. So personally, I would be supportive of that change for graduation. And it is outdoors, which just is a whole different world. It's not a perfect world, but it's a whole different world safety wise.
I guess my question around that is that, if, you've got a family of 4 people and maybe you've got one member who's immunocompromised, and yes, they can show up with a face visor and an N95 mask. But I guess I wonder, we're making a trade-off, right? We're basically saying we want to accommodate bigger families. And that makes a lot of sense to me. I support doing whatever we can to accommodate bigger families, because I certainly know with my own family how big extended families can get very quickly. But are we going to be at the same time taking people who are comfortable attending an outdoor event where their closest neighbor is 6 feet away without a mask on, who now say, I don't really want to go to graduation now, because now there's going to be someone 3 feet away from me with a mask. I can go see a soccer game, and if someone gets a little too close, I can walk away. But with graduation, you've got fixed seats, the ceremony's going on. It's a little bit of a different story than just an athletic event where it's easy to move around and kind of keep your distance from someone, as I think. So we'd be making that decision.
I agree. I mean,
And just families.
It's the balance we've been doing all year is one end of the spectrum of no masks, no distancing, let kids be kids. The other end of the spectrum, how dare you even suggest that we would, not be fully. And so it's always been this balance of trying to respect that whole spectrum. I would say the nice thing about outside and the way the seating will be, if someone is, immunocompromised, they can choose their seating based on that. They won't be tied down to maybe where their family pod is. They could choose a seat in the back. They could choose a seat that's further away from maybe other people. It's just more seating options if we do it this way.
Yeah, and also, I mean, if one person's immunocompromised, they can sit, in the end of an aisle with some other family members as a buffer between non-family members, or, I know that the other family member gets, I know there's always risk, but I do think the open seating provides some flexibility and options around, some choices around that too, for people at that end of the spectrum. I don't think there's a perfect solution. I wish I had one, but there's not. Any other thoughts?
Well,
Is it accurate? I guess my question is it accurate to say that we would not be able to do 6 foot distancing with an open seating arrangement with the amount of space we have? Is that correct?
With individual seats spaced 6 feet apart? No.
Okay.
All right, I want to make sure we hear from other board members. For Meredith, go ahead.
Yeah, I was also going to say that not only is the seating more flexible, but you can also move and stand somewhere. If you're just in the spot you're not comfortable, you can stand on the side, or we're not going to force everyone to take a seat necessarily. So there's plenty of room out there to spread out. If you're not able to find the seat that you want, you can stand off to the side and watch the ceremony. So I do think that this affords us that opportunity to, to try to strike that balance of, having some protective spacing, but also trying to accommodate families who, are expressing this concern to us about, the seating arrangement. So, the indoor seating certainly is most challenging, but, I'm knocking on this Formica top here. The weather looks good for Sunday. So I'm optimistic that, the outdoor seating as Reg is proposing can be, workable and also comfortable for everyone, because it gives lots of flexibility for people. And I think that, I come from a place where outdoor graduations are the norm. And, also they're ticketed. And so this whole ticket market thing is something I was used to. And it is something that, you trade if you need to. And I would also just say it's an outdoor event. And, if someone's standing off, last night, there were, some family members at 8th grade graduation standing off in the distance because they were in seats of 3. So, if you have family members who need to stand off to the side, I don't think anyone's going to come over and tell you need to leave. So that's the other thing I would say.
Okay, I can get behind this plan then. I really like the flexibility of it, and I like including as many people as possible.
Mark or Jake? I would also just note we have a really long night and we still have 2 more COVID agenda things to go through. So
In that theme, I'll just say I'm supportive of the plan that Reg has proposed, and that's it.
thanks.
Yeah, I'm totally supportive of the plan Reg has proposed. I'm also, I'm assuming that the sound system is going to be of sufficient strength that people would be able to hear beyond. I assume this is the varsity soccer field. Is that correct?
I'm bringing my boombox. Yeah.
All right. Well, if assuming people can hear, I think that we have plenty of space.
Yeah, no, we've hired Mark's Music and Brewer, so they're providing the stage, the sound, it's a professional sound system. It'll be plenty loud. They'll hear it down.
That's awesome. So I would think that if the chairs are all taken up, and people want to spread out to other fields, just regardless of how much distance they feel the need to keep from other people, I would think that no one would be running around playing distance police on that. So I'm supportive of that as well.
Yeah, we're renting 700 chairs from Wallace Tent that provided the prom tent. They're being dropped off Thursday. Mark's Music is setting up the stage Saturday afternoon, evening. We're going to start setting up the chairs Saturday at the same time. So,
All right.
I think we're in good shape.
So in terms of summer planning, this agenda item was really to give some discussion around how we're going to plan for fall and what that looks like. I skipped remote learning. Sorry. The remote learning discussion, we're going to circle back to that before we go to summer planning. Last meeting we looked at the summer or the fall, the remote learning survey data that we collected and put forth a recommendation that we had for what remote learning would look like for us in the fall. And if you recall, we said that it would be more limited in scope and it would provide interim remote learning primarily through asynchronous learning, and that it would require some qualifying criteria such as documented medical needs long-term, more than 5 days for illness or family displacement. And that seems to, I've not received any feedback since we rolled this out last meeting, but we talked about circling back to this and just giving this more discussion. I think that having something for families who have a documented need is important. And I think our staff, particularly middle and high school, feel like that's something that's that they can see a way to provide meaningful instruction for those students. I think for elementary, that still is, you know, kind of a challenging piece to figure out. And if we have someone who comes to us with that kind of documented need, I think we would be looking at probably external options for, if it's more than just a you know, if it's for a placement that looks like it's longer than a few weeks. Meredith Diamond and I have started to do some research for elementary level remote learning options. They're limited because of the same reason that we have concerns about providing remote learning for elementary grades. There are some options available. Most districts who are providing this are either, you know, they're large enough that they have enough staff or enough students to have a staff dedicated to this, or they're contracting with, there really are, you know, 3 or 4 national companies that are in this business, and they're contracting with those companies. I think those would be the options that we would be looking at for students who we think fits this criteria for elementary grade levels. I think for families who don't meet this criteria, those options may be options that they could explore themselves on a, you know, individual basis. They would be probably considered in a homeschool kind of placement in these if they were doing this independent outside of our placement there. And we'll continue to do some research so that we have some information to share if families are interested. I guess the third option that I didn't really mention is also, you know, with homeschool options, there are collaboratives of families who work together, and sometimes they use this kind of programming, but other times they use collective kind of expertise in the collaborative to, or they maybe hire some support for different aspects of the curriculum. So I think that's another option that, you know, families over the years have considered when they wanted something different than a traditional school placement. But I think, you know, going back to our kind of instinct that focusing on how to provide, you know, a meaningful in-person experience that we feel like is what we do best, is where the majority of our resource and energies will be placed for the coming year. And that this, on a limited basis, kind of remote learning option is the, you know, is really supported by the data that we have of what the demand is, and also what our staff feels like is sustainable for them to be able to deliver next year.
So I will just say that I supported your proposal the last time we met, and nothing has changed with my support for that proposal. So I'm going to stop there.
Yeah, I agree with Jake.
Yeah, I also think the proposal makes a lot of sense. We just, you know, I'd love to, a lot of things I'd love to do, but we just don't have the capacity to do everything. Public schools have a rule, they take every kid, and I think we do a spectacular job of giving every kid with varying needs a good education, but we don't serve every kind of educational approach and philosophy to everybody who wants a different approach. So that's just not the public school mission. So I think, again, if we were a larger district and could put one teacher with 20 kids, maybe, but we're not in that situation. So I think this is the realistic policy that we have, and they're really, it's the same, you know, we have parents every year who don't like whatever they don't like about the schools and pull their kid out for private school, homeschool, or some other option. So I would love to be able to do more, but we can't. So this seems like the right approach to me. And there are various approaches available to parents who are in that position.
Yeah, I also at this point support that proposal. You know, we gave it a couple weeks for people to give feedback. I didn't hear anything either. The only concern I have, you know, the only reservation I have is that if there are families where there's a financial barrier to doing something, And if they're not plugged into the school board meetings, and this arises in the fall, I'd just like to see some flexibility from the school in terms of accommodating people who have needs. But I think that the logic behind it is sound, and I'm fully prepared to support it at this point.
Okay.
Well, yeah, thank you for your support of that. And I think that it will be a component of our back to school plan that is beginning to take shape and will continue to take shape over the next 2 months. But this particular aspect, we want to go ahead and get out to families so they're, aware of what the criteria is, and if they need to work on some documentation, can begin to do so. So we'll work on that. So for fall planning, as I mentioned, the state said they're getting a new set of guidance out to us, but they say it's not a significant change. They felt like it was an important change, but not a significant change. And they really are trying to balance, the two competing, priorities around getting schools guidance as soon as they can, but getting schools guidance that will still be relevant when we open in August. And so kind of having those two different goals met with how guidance is rolled out and when, I think is something that we're not sure when that's going to happen, and they're not really saying yet. But what I propose, Brian and I have talked about this, and we think it seems like a reasonable approach, is that we form a stakeholder group like we did last year. And when we get new guidance, the admin team will synthesize that, begin to form some recommendations based on all the discussion we've had already through, several curriculum committee meetings, faculty meetings, board meetings, with this guidance to bring that to a stakeholder group to have some reaction to, feedback for, and then hopefully we'll have new guidance to be able to do that by mid-July. Mm-hmm. And then after we have the stakeholder meeting, have a board workshop that, we can bring this information to the full board and have, a workshop to discuss it and have community input and feedback in order to, kind of begin to shape what fall will look like. I mean, mainly it's around health and safety requirements. That's what we're waiting on to see what changes there will be around masking, distancing. Those are the two big ones. I think, some of the science around cleaning is telling us that those aren't as important, but those haven't dropped from the guidance yet. We'll see if they get dropped from the guidance. Ventilation, I'm not sure we'll ever want to change, kind of what we've learned this year about ventilation in terms of, maybe we wouldn't make it quite as cold if conditions are better in classrooms in the winter, but I think we've learned that's a really important strategy for air quality. But we invested in MERV 13 filters. We have those in place. And so we invested in some upgrades in our ventilation. So those will be in place. But, so mainly my I think the big questions are around masking and social distancing. I fully expect that we'll be able to have all kids in person in the fall. But the question is what it will look like. And I think that's what we just need to wait a little longer on guidance to find out what the guidance is. And then we, put together a stakeholder committee just to consider that. Because, they're in different nuances of the school, we have to consider how to apply the guidance. And so if we have a stakeholder convening by mid-July, Brian and I talked about scheduling a board workshop a week after that, somewhere the week of the 20th of July, and begin to, have a plan that we can formalize at our first August board meeting. So that's the general frame. Wanted to see your thoughts on that. Last summer we met all summer. It it was, you know, a difficult process, but I think this summer it looks a lot different because I really think we've come so far that there are really just a couple of fronts that we'll have to get some new guidance on and then respond to. And I feel like it's going to be a much easier climb to make this summer to figure out those two nuances for fall.
I mean, I would agree, obviously, since we've talked about it. The only thing I would add is I do think there may be some trade-offs between vaccines and testing and distancing and masking. I don't know, I'm just speculating, but it wouldn't shock me if those are in the guidelines. If you do this, you can not have to do that. And so that's one reason I think it's important to have stakeholder group involved in that decision and to have a board conversation. If it was just sticking to the science, our practice has kind of been the administration interprets the community DOE and CDC guidelines, and then the board kind of endorses that. But we may end up in a place where there's some value-based decisions, I think, with these trade-offs too. So I think getting stakeholders involved is important.
Do you know the makeup of the stakeholder group to some degree? You know, community members, size, so forth?
Yeah, I think last year was a little unwieldy, but it was important that we had everyone involved last summer. But we were thinking something that resembles, I would say 15 or so, no more than 15, like 12 to 15 would be ideal. And that has all stakeholders, all schools represented. So, you know, teachers or staff, parents, student perspective, administrators, board members. So in that vein, we'll need, you know, a board member to serve on the stakeholder committee this summer. And, you know, we can probably wait and do that the next meeting, or we can do that now. But just wanted to kind of get a nod of whether or not you like the process and feel like it's the right direction.
I feel like it's a good process. I feel like it's the right direction.
I'm fine with the process. I'm glad, Meredith, that you mentioned student input on that. I think that's critical, especially at the high school. And I think maybe even the middle school, if I'm not 100% sure on that. High school definitely, but middle school I think should be an option too. I think that they're an important voice that should be in on this conversation. So I think the timing works well. I don't think the update that's going to come out soon is going to be the last one. I think there's going to be multiple. I think we're going to have to, part of this planning is going to be planning to be flexible and adaptable on the fly, because my guess is things are going to change. I mean, hopefully if you know, the number of active COVID cases continues to go down, then the changes will be in a positive direction. If in the unfortunate event things go the other way, restrictions might have to be reimposed, but we're going to have to, again, be flexible. So I think whoever's on this stakeholder group, one of the things that's going to be critical is kind of gaming out different options. You know, if A, then what do we do? If B, then what do we do? So, but I think the approach is fine, just with the recognition that whatever comes out of that group in July might be obsolete 2 or 3 days after that.
Yeah, that's been a key learning this year, that, you know, new guidance can be right around the corner. I think literally this summer or this spring, we had a meeting and the next day something crucial came out that really would have informed the decision the night before differently. So that's just a given. And it is, I agree, we're going to have to be patient to get the guidance that will probably be most realistically the guidance that holds for opening school. So next meeting, I'll bring back kind of a list of the stakeholders so you can kind of see, and then we'll maybe fill the board seats. Does that sound good? Okay. Yep.
So next up, we had goals discussion, which in particular, I want to make sure we get Huz's name, but I also noticed that we have three people here are probably here for the staff hiring recommendations. So I'm wondering if the board would like to go ahead and move that up first so that, all right, so I'd make a motion that we move staff hiring recommendations ahead of board review of goals workshop. Is there a second for that agenda change?
Second.
Any discussion? Okay, we'll go ahead and vote. Jake,
Aye.
Patrick,
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
I'll also vote aye. So the way this always works is we will go into an executive session for the board to be briefed on the candidates. Hopefully that we do have 4 candidates, but keep that as short as we can. And then when we come out, there will be votes on the hiring. So I'll make a motion to go into executive session under 1 MRSA 405 6A, discussion of confidential personnel matters. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Go ahead and vote. Jake,
Aye.
Patrick,
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
I also vote aye. Meredith, do we have a link to go to?
I'm working on that now. I'll have it sent to you momentarily. So I'll send that to board members and Lisa Smith.
Okay, so we will be dropping out of this meeting, but have no fear, we're coming back. I don't have an exact estimate, but I'm somewhere 15 minutes plus or minus would be my guess. And so please hang out and we'll be back. Right now you're the host, Meredith, so we got to transfer that to Rachel before you quit.